I'm gonna, once it goes, I'll say when it's live. I'm gonna give it 30 seconds of the holding slide.
Good evening. I think we're broadcasting now. So, hello. Welcome back to the Signal series from the Science Gallery in Dublin. This is the first time we've tried it remotely, so tonight is quite an ambitious project. Hopefully it will work, and if it doesn't, well, we try not to identify that too strongly. My name is Martin Clancy. I'm the curator and host of the Signal series, and I'm joined tonight by a number of people. Beside me here is Vasileios Gourgourinis, and Vasileios is a producer, a sound engineer, and a lecturer. We'll talk a little bit more about Vasileios in a moment. And then from Berlin, we are very happy to have, and I can see that he's on our monitor, we'll introduce him to you in a moment, is Simon Hayes, who's the product owner of Ableton, and he's the chap who's been behind so much of the excitement in this new version. I'm going to talk about that very shortly. Also online, we are joined from London by Simon Lyon, who is a brand owner at Ableton, who will answer any questions that the audience have in real time as we go through. And I think that's pretty much the overview of where we are, so we should get started. So I'll say a little bit about Ableton. We're here tonight to talk about Ableton 11, which came out in February. Vas, you've been using Ableton for a number of years now. Can you tell us a little bit, if someone just tuned in tonight, like what is Ableton and why is it so special to you, or is it special to you?
It is. Ableton is a digital audio workstation. It's basically a software that allows you to record audio, to manipulate audio, to edit. Same thing with MIDI information, record, edit, manipulate, creating audio mixdowns, and finalizing tracks. So basically the idea is, yeah,
that seems like a pretty good explanation. We also, myself and Vas, teach classes together in Ableton, and one of the things that we have great fun doing is seeing Ableton as a living instrument, not just a DAW. And there's lots of reasons, and we'll touch on many of these things tonight with Simon, because it's really what distinguishes Ableton. We're not saying that it's better than other DAWs that are out there, but it's certainly different. And part of what makes it different is the community of creatives that work in and around Ableton, and that's what we're going to touch on tonight. So I think it's time we should introduce Simon and see if I can see you. Can you hear us, Simon?
Yeah, I can hear you well.
Oh, very good. So we're broadcasting here from Trinity. First of all, you're a Dubliner, so we'll just talk a little bit about you first of all, because I was surprised to find out, but also, delighted to find out that you're a graduate of Trinity. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. I'm from Dublin originally, from Seapoint, and I am also a Trinity graduate from electronic and computer engineering. I graduated in 2009 and legged it over to to Berlin pretty quickly after that. I think it was even the same year.
And many of my students, I know Vass's students, the same. Berlin is this mythical place for music tech. You have landed the amazing job that pretty much everybody who works in music technology would dream of. I'm sure it's probably not like that in reality, but that's certainly how it would appear. People go to Berlin all the time. How hard was it for you at the beginning? Like, what was your first experiences like going to Berlin?
Yeah, it's a funny one. I mean, when I left university and packed my bags and got on the plane, I definitely had a lot of enthusiasm and I guess optimism probably is the right word. Probably a silly amount of optimism now that I think back on it. So I was also big into music, and my goal was move to Berlin, kick off a successful music career and start to work at Ableton. Easy. I very quickly realized that this wouldn't be the case. It really took me many years before I was able to find my feet in Berlin. So yeah, Berlin is definitely this mythical city. There's a fantastic music scene. There's fantastic just nightlife in general, and the whole vibe of the city is great. There's a lot of creativity, a lot of galleries and all kinds of things like that. But it can also be a tough city. So when I came here first, I couldn't find work. My savings quickly started to run out. I tried to get into Ableton like right away and got rejected. I mean, understandably so. I wasn't experienced enough, and as I said, I studied electronic and computer engineering, but I wouldn't say that I was a very talented coder or anything like that, but somehow I still thought that this was all going to work out. So yeah, it was quite disheartening, truth be told, the first couple of years. I ended up...
Did you DJ during that first period?
Yeah, I mean, that was maybe the other side of things. I came over expecting the city to be this center of music. As those of you who might know my music, I'm quite into the experimental side of things. Back then, so this is going back to 2009, back then the city was a little bit more monotone in the offerings when it came to music. So as a DJ, I kind of struggled to find gigs or to go to the gigs that I really enjoyed going to. So I started running my own at one point. I started setting up some parties with friends to play the kind of music that I was used to hearing in Dublin, actually. So we kind of brought this sound from Dublin with us, which was quite interesting. And things kind of took off for me from that point for when it came to music. But it wasn't until much later that I kind of found my way through the door at Ableton.
And you started at Ableton working in support. What was that like? That must have been a real daunting task to have to answer any question that would come in.
So the one thing that I still marvel at, even though I've been at the company for quite a while, is our support team is fantastic. It's a fantastic bunch of people who work together. I think when I was there was I think one of my colleagues was actually an astrophysicist. There was like a big... Not saying that you need to be an astrophysicist to work at Ableton support, but
gives you an idea.
Yeah, but they were very welcoming. There was a lot of support to kind of help me kind of figure out the tone and all these things to use when I spoke to customers. Now, at the time, I was still, I would say I was, very well versed in Live. I mean, Live would have been the software I used day and night. That kind of, making music got me through the tougher times in Berlin. Live was at the center of that. So I worked with the support team in sales support. Then later I went to technical support, where you start to help people with problems that they're facing. kind of run diagnostics with them and kind of help them out, or you even just help them with questions they might have, like, hey, I want to do a live set, how do I go about it, you know? So we really, like back then, we really went above and beyond for our users, and I think now it's also true. The support team is fantastic, I think.
That's good. It's good to hear, certainly. And tell me, what does product owner mean? So it's a very Germanic title, if you don't mind me saying so. It's
yeah, it's one of these software titles that nobody really understands. Yeah, so as the product owner, I'm responsible for the vision. So, you know, the very essence of what we imagine live to be. I make decisions about the future, where we should go, where we should invest our development efforts. Of course, I don't work alone. There's a big team that I've built up beneath me. So in fact, there are actually several sub teams, each of which have their own product owner, and I'm kind of, you could call me a product manager. Actually, I think is the correct software term that they use. So yeah, I think probably the toughest part of the job that I do now is not deciding what to do, because as you can imagine, there are a million ideas knocking around. It's deciding what not to do. So there are so many ideas that we could take on, and some of them just end up being too costly, or they don't really fit the software, and these are the kind of difficult decisions that I have to make sometimes.
It must be such an exciting position to be in. I mean, do you integrate with obviously the wider Ableton community, with artists as well, and how far into the future would you plan, or would you hope to plan?
Well, we have different time horizons. So we look. So we have a saying inside the team, which is that our quality is our number one feature. So we tend to look quite near into the future in terms of like making sure that we fix all these problems that are coming in, making sure our software is stable, because people have to take this thing on stage, you know. But then we also have a further planning horizon. So, I mean, for example, already right now we're thinking Live 12, what could Live 12 be? You know, which sounds absurd. Live 11 just came out, but we're already thinking about the next thing, trying to imagine. And then we even think further into the future. You know, there are questions like, you know, machine learning, what does that mean for music making? The emergence of virtual reality and things like this, you know. So there's a lot of these much more longer term questions that we also need to consider.
That's brilliant. And when we speak about a new version, because tonight we're going to focus on Ableton 11, like during any Ableton particularly, you have major updates that will occur. I'm thinking, like, remember 9.5 and 9.7, and they're quite dramatic changes. So is it a commercial decision that you say, okay, now this is time for a new version, or as opposed to an update, or is it a mixture of both, or?
It's kind of a mixture of both, I would say. Of course, I mean, with every big new release, it generates revenue for the company. That's revenue that we can funnel back in, and we can do a lot with. So, I mean, like any business, we need revenue to survive, of course. But also, these big releases allow us to kind of make a bigger impact in the world of music making. So it gives us time to kind of, you know, think long and hard about what it is that we want to do, and to really take our time to develop these things correctly, to make sure all the workflows are properly streamlined, that everything feels right, and then we can kind of release it out to the world when it's ready.
Understood.
Yeah.
And when you have, for instance, with with this version of Ableton, it's been out officially since February. So how have you? I have to ask you, how have you found the reaction to it? Have you been pleased, surprised, or have you had enough time to digest the reaction yet from users?
It's funny, when I was talking to someone about this recently, we compared it to releasing an LP, or releasing a record. Where by the time it comes out, you're kind of not that you're so done with it, but that you've seen it so much, you've been so involved in it, you're kind of like, okay, that's over and done with now. What's next?
Right.
So I think it's important to try and take the time to reflect on things. So the feedback we got with this release was fantastic. People seemed hugely happy. Many people talked about, I mean, obviously, you know, to mention the elephant in the room, this whole thing is happening in the middle of this pandemic. And there's something about connecting with music that can help people through these times. So I think having a big release like that with a bunch of new features to explore and distract you from the world around you, I think is also a very exciting thing.
I have to point out, I mean, while myself and Vas don't work for Ableton, one thing that we did notice, which during when the pandemic started, was the fact that the trial version was extended to 3 months.
That was absolutely great.
And that
yeah.
made a huge difference
Huge.
because students who, for instance, working from home could have access to that. You found that a lot, all your classes.
That was a big deal. And that was really good. I have to say, like, that was really good reflexes in terms of how to
Because it
anticipate
was the first company to do it, wasn't it? I think.
I'm not sure, but I think it was like it was that gave like a solution. Like a lot of people that had to work from home, and they just found that solution really helpful. So yeah, absolutely great.
Yeah, I mean, we of course thought a lot about what we could do, what we could give back to the community, and this was something that we felt was right to do.
No, I mean, we both love the software, the changes that have occurred, so it's been great fun. Now, before we go into a deep dive into Ableton 11, I just want to talk a little bit about your own work and how you integrate, or do you separate your work as a programmer, as an engineer, from an artist, or are they just arbitrary distinctions? You work underneath the moniker of Swarm Intelligence, which you've used for a long time, and I'm a big fan. When I heard this, I was also kind of a bit taken back as well to think that, well, we won't ruin it for you're going to hopefully play us some extracts as well in your workflow. But can you just tell a little bit from a personal point of view, from your own creativity, how you interact with Ableton?
Sure. I mean, I think so. The whole Swarm Intelligence name comes from university. So I found the courses that I did. I mean, engineering is a very difficult subject. A lot of the stuff is very tough. We did a lot of things like DSP, digital signal processing. A lot of the exercises that we would do, like in a computer lab, would be trying to, like, you'd have an image that had a lot of noise in it, which you were trying to extract, or you're trying to clean up a signal. Of course, what I wanted to do was exactly the opposite. And I remember there was a couple of times when, completely failed the assignment and made, like, the program that I made just this horrible noise, and I was delighted. I took that away with me. And I don't know, I think I'm to different ideas of dystopia and the role of technology in society and stuff. So artificial intelligence was something that I kind of was playing around with the idea, and then I stumbled across Swarm Intelligence, where it was, inspired by nature. So that's where the name came from, and you can already see that the engineering and the music were quite close together.
That seems like a perfect segue.
When it comes to my
maybe
day job now.
So
Sorry,
maybe that's a good point for us to have a closer look at some of your favorite devices, if you don't mind us asking. And we'll switch to your computer and Ableton 11. And feel free, would love to see what do you, as a creative, for yourself, what are you most proud of in the devices that the team have shaped?
Yeah, maybe let me switch to my computer, then I can show you some of these things. Okay, hold on. So hopefully you can see live now in the background.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer, I have to say. There's a lot of the new things that really appeal to me. Of course, I also used my influence a little bit to try and get some of these things made. I think, I mean, personally with my sound, reverb plays a huge part in my production. So I think I might start there with our new hybrid reverb device. So, I mean, unless you're sitting in an anechoic chamber, every sound we experience is somehow attached to a physical space. So in my mind, just a very dry synthesized sound, it often feels kind of artificial and not in a good way. With reverb, you can, like, manipulate space, and that means you can sculpt the perception of a given sound in creative ways. So that's something that really appeals to me. I think it's definitely easier if I just demonstrate something to you here. So I'd like to show you this hybrid reverb device. So this is kind of a special reverb because it actually has two different kinds of reverb built into one, hence the name. So it's convolution reverb and also an algorithmic reverb, and these can be configured and blended together in different ways. Convolution reverb is, from my point of view, a really interesting type of reverb because it lets you simulate a physical space. So for example, you can make your synth sound like it was recorded in an abandoned underground tunnel or a teacup. And the way it does this is by using a special audio file called an impulse response. And what it does then is it kind of combines it, it convolves it with the audio. So that's where the name comes from. I would say for anyone who's listening, if you can listen on headphones, it would be better. I think this might get a bit lost on laptop speakers, but let's have a look. So I'm just going to play. So I have a bass here. I'll play the bass with no reverb first of all. And now I'm going to switch on hybrid reverb, and I'm just going to. So what I'll do first of all is I'll switch it just to the convolution engine. And I'll flick through some of these impulse responses so you can see what it sounds like. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, these things are called impulse responses, and the way that you create these sounds is basically you try and record the reverberation of a space when you play an impulse in it. So an impulse could be popping of a balloon or the firing of a starter gun. So basically you can create these yourself. You can go into a space and try and make a very, sharp sound that's an impulse and record the space. And then you can just drop it in here and it works. Of course, if you don't want to record your own ones, you can use the ones built in, or you can download impulse response libraries from the internet. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of some quite interesting impulse responses that I've collected over the years. So I'll start off with this one from Teufelsberg. So Teufelsberg is a famous listening station used by the Americans during the Cold War. It's been abandoned for many years, and now you can even book tours to climb around inside it. Right up the very top is this amazing sphere. I think it's called a radome. And I remember, going back quite a while, I remember climbing up there. And as I got up to the top, as I came inside this sphere, my foot kind of just scuffed a bit of gravel or something. And I was stunned. This sound kind of bounced around for ages from what seemed like from all sides. It was just, I can't really even describe how cool it was. So I was really happy when I came across this mastering studio, and they went and recorded the space, and you can download these for free. I think it's balancemastering.com. But I'll play you an impulse response from there, and you can kind of listen out to the flutter of the sound as it bounces around.
Oh, very nice.
So yeah, then you can just drop one of those in there, and now all of a sudden my bass was recorded in Teufelsberg.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was a big, huge space. But this can also be used with really tight spaces. I mean, it can be used with all kinds of spaces, but I find these very almost claustrophobic spaces also super interesting to work with. So I have this pack as well. I think I got it off a website called audioease.com, where they have a lot of impulse responses, and it's called claustrophobia, so it kind of does what it says on the tin. There are recordings of dustbins and flower pots and glass cups. I quite like this one here. There's like a vacuum cleaner tube. And it works really nicely, so I use it for a trick to kind of boost my kick drum. So you can see I have it loaded here. So I'll just play the sound first of all so that you can hear it. Doesn't sound like much, but you know, kind of sounds like yeah, what you could imagine it would be. So I will play the kick without any sound, without any reverb added. I'm just going to blend this in, and also look, you'll see that the frequency where the kick sits will also start to spike because I've tuned this to that frequency. So it's quite a nice way. It gives the kick this really strange, like claustrophobic space, but also makes it feel much bigger. So yeah, that's a fun thing you can do with these. There's another cool trick which I think I'd like to share as well when it comes to convolution. So of course this engine is designed for impulse responses, but you're not limited with what you put in there. You can throw anything in there, any audio file you like. So let me try. Okay, I have this ARP lead here. So let's just play this. So that's just the dry sound. And I'll drop some random sample in here. We were talking earlier, the dart passed as we were setting up earlier, and I promised that I would get some dart samples in there because I have some field recordings. So let me see how that works. So that's the sound of a train arriving in Pier Station, I think.
All right.
I'm gonna stick that in here.
Okay.
It's not any kind of an impulse response. It's just a field recording.
Yeah.
I'll play this now.
Oh.
So,
Oh,
yeah.
what's not to love about that? That is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to be had with that.
It really is, and thanks for that. That's a great. I mean, one of the things that became clear to me when we were chatting about this when we put Ableton 11 on, was that everything just sounded really good. Not that it had sounded in any way bad before, but everything has started sounding just had this extra dimension. And
Tricked, yeah, like it.
yeah, and it's become increased. Well, this is a progression, I think, since 9. Always become more musical and more adventurous. And I would like you to talk a little bit about the role of MPE in the design of 11, because like a lot is made about it. We've been kind of shocked by how a lot of the instruments in Ableton suddenly become something quite different than they were before. Can you tell us why that's so important, and how people can use it?
Sure. So I think to understand MPE, it's probably important first of all to explain MIDI. So when we talk about MIDI, what do we actually mean? MIDI it's essentially a language that's made up of ones and zeros that you can tell your computer or your synth to play a certain note in a certain way, or kind of to keep up in time, to play at a certain speed. The kind of information that you can send your computer, the instructions that you can give it are quite limited. So there's not so much that you can really say except for play this pitch for this long at this loudness. MPE changes all of that. So MPE, also known as, the abbreviation is for MIDI polyphonic expression. So it's an extension to MIDI. And the big advantage is that it brings the ability to add more control information, more expression into individual notes. This all sounds kind of complex, so I think it might be easier just to show you what I mean.
That would be great.
So I have here, okay, let's imagine I'm in the middle of writing a song and I want to kind of create a dramatic moment. So I come up with, I have a chord here that's it's kind of like a dark sounding chord, which I think will work quite nicely. So let's just play the plain chord first of all. Okay, so we have this chord now, and what I want to do is somehow add tension. I want to, build up somehow. So with MIDI, what I could do, for example, is I could do a pitch bend. So the pitch bend in MIDI is a global pitch bend, so all of the notes will be, increased or decreased in pitch altogether. So let's see how that sounds. I just have this rise in pitch. Now, to me, that sounds a little bit obvious. It's not like with my own music. I prefer something a bit more nuanced, something a bit, a bit less obvious. Yeah. So this is where MPE can play a big role. So what I did there, as you saw, was I just tried to make all of the notes rise in pitch. But what if I wanted to do something like have some notes rise and some notes go down in pitch all at the same time? So that would look something like this. So you can, hopefully this comes across over the...
Yeah, we can see that clearly.
So you have all of these different pitch bends that are happening. And when I play this, you'll hear a big difference to the last clip that I played. So if you have been to a cinema in the last 10 years, you've probably heard a similar sound, which is quite a famous sound called the deep note. It's like a trademark of THX. And of course that was done with a huge amount of work then, but now with MPE it's much easier to do it. Mm-hmm. A big part of MPE is that it brings expression to your fingertips. So if you have something like a Roly keyboard, you can really control the sound in a very nuanced way. I'm not the most let's say gifted when it comes to playing instruments, like physically playing instruments. I'm much more about the mouse and keyboard. So I'm quite happy with this because I can go in and I can program things the way I want. So what we just saw there was just one parameter. This was just the per note pitch bend. MPE has 5 parameters. So there is pitch bend, there's slide, pressure, velocity, and release velocity. So I'll give you another example here, where I went in and by hand programmed some quite choppy expression into an arpeggio, which I want to use for like kind of a sort of a techie lead line. So here it is with no MPE, just the straight MIDI notes. And now with MPE. So I'll open this up. So here you can see all of the automation I've done. So yeah, you can just really like breathe life into a sound using MPE. That's probably the best way I can summarize it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the perfect description of what we were finding when we were working through some of the instruments. There was new life in them.
Absolutely, yeah.
And also, you can say that we will have a look at the use of push in a little while to talk about as in terms of that. Was there anything you would like to ask about MPE?
Again, I think it's like just in addition to what Simon was saying, like in terms of how, because some people prefer to program things, like to draw things in, and that gives you all of that liberty, like Simon was describing now, or even when you play them in and you're capturing them, that option, basically having like an instrument that gives you that possibility is just so amazing. Like.
Absolutely. It really, we can only recommend at this point that if you haven't heard of MPE, have a look. The Roly keyboards are very good examples of it. There's also cheaper controllers as well that have functions that work in that way. But I think we've given a good example of that. Now, I just want to ask you, there was one of the other things that in Ableton 11 that I noticed that was the way that you had kind of harnessed all of the probability and chance controls inside Ableton. Can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, from a design point of view, like what was the motivation behind that? I know why. I mean, from using it, it's great fun. But what brought that to mind, and why was that such a big issue for you?
I think, I mean, there are certain aspects of this that have been part of Live since a very early incarnation. So, for example, there are something called follow actions, which I can demonstrate shortly. These are things that existed in the software before that we built upon and made more kind of versatile now. I think there's maybe something that's always been in our minds, and that is thinking about the role that software plays in music making. So often when we think about a DAW, we think about, you as the user, you program in a bunch of stuff and it does exactly what it tells you to do, and that's the end of the story. But we started to imagine a kind of a bit more of almost like a creative collaboration with the software, where rather than you giving it exactly the instructions to do, you would give it some space to decide for itself what it wanted to do. And this was a nice way to kind of bring some variation, some chance, because I mean a lot of the music I make, for example, is very loop based. So this is a nice way to sort of, every time something loops around, it loops in a slightly different way. You hear a little different variation, and that's it's something that we thought was really powerful, and it's definitely something that we're still quite interested in. I'm personally also still very interested in this whole thing. I think it might make sense just to kind of show an example of what
that'd be great.
Absolutely.
So if we take a hi-hat pattern here, so I'll just play it as normal.
Mm-hmm.
So it just keeps repeating the same thing over and over again. And I might start to think, this is getting a little bit boring now. I want to kind of add a little bit of variation in. So one of the first things I might like to do is, so right now, let me pop this up here. Right now, all of these things have the same velocity. And I could go in and change so the velocity is how loud they're played. I could go in and change the velocity for each individual note. But what I might like to do is kind of let Live decide how loud to play each of these things. So what I can do is I can hold down the command key here, and I can draw in this velocity range. And what will happen here is that every time a note is played, Live will kind of decide how loud it should be played within this range. So let's have a listen to how that sounds. Sorry, I just muted the other ones because you couldn't really hear it so well. But yeah, you can hear there's a bit more variation and kind of fluctuation now in the volume. And another thing I can do is I could, for example, all these other little filler hats, I could reduce the likelihood of them playing at all. So by default it's 100%, it will always play. But I could say, let's pull it right down. Let's say it's only 30% likely that will play. And now you'll hear it'll be a lot sparser and with a lot more movement.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so that's a lot of fun. So that's, I mean, those are the velocity ranges and the chances. That's for within a MIDI clip. We have another, so I talked about these follow actions before, which I can demonstrate now as well. So it's worth first explaining what a follow action is. So when you launch a clip, you can set what's called a follow action, which means after you've launched the clip, what happens next. So normally the clip will just loop, you play it and it just plays. But you can also say, so you can choose from one of these things here. You can say, when I've played you once, you should stop, you should play again, you should play the clip before you or after you, or the first clip in this track, or the last clip, or any other clip, or sorry, any clip or any other clip, so you shouldn't play yourself again, or you can jump to a specific clip. So these things you can do some quite creative things with this. So you can set two follow actions and set a probability that one or the other happens. So Yeah, I'll just demonstrate with this example. So what I've done here is I've created 5 clips here that all just have one note, nothing else. So these all just have a single note in them. They're all 1 bar long, and I've set them all to have a 95% chance of playing a different one of these 5 clips, and a 5% chance that they'll repeat. And what this basically does is you're giving live an input, and it's kind of helping you, it's writing the melody, it's sequencing these notes based on this roll of the dice. So I'll play this now and you'll see what I mean. So yeah, it's quite an interesting way. Like, what you can do is you could have several different instruments all doing this, and these follow actions are also built into the scenes here. So with the scenes you can launch a whole row of clips simultaneously. So that becomes quite interesting. You can build up these quite complex relationships or dependencies between these two things, and live suddenly kind of comes alive with all of these things together. It sort of comes alive and starts to play a different role in the music, which is something that I consider to be fascinating anyway.
Oh, it certainly is. I mean, follow actions, what we've been given when we were given a class is we often, because follow actions was always there, but it was always kind of hidden. And one of the things I liked about, and we saw the original version of 11, was the fact that something that was in the background had now been brought very much to the forward. And the addition of bringing it into scenes, it's a game changer, because you can effectively set it up and record it into the arrange page, and you have no idea of what's going to occur. That's from a compositional point of view, and then from a performance point of view, it's great. It just really is. It's a lot. I think we should emphasize how much fun this is. I mean, this is the key part of Ableton 11. I find is it draws you in, because, as I say, a lot of things have been brought very much closer to the front, and a lot of the devices seem to have been simplified as well, which I love, with the new phaser and flanger combination. Speaking of simplicity, can you tell us a little bit about the relationship of Max? Because for a lot of people, when they hear about Max, because it's a visual programming language and Max for Live, it's the point where their involvement with Ableton kind of departs, because it gets a bit too nerdy. But yet, Max, certainly the Max devices that are available now, are interchangeable from the Ableton devices. Can you just tell us a little bit about all of that, and how Cycling 74 works? Like, what's the relationship as designers? And I think a large part of our audience would be interested in both that being demystified, but also just like, how does that work in terms of the community as well?
Yeah, so I think when I try to think about the benefits of Max, or like if someone was to stop me on the street for some weird reason and ask me why Max for Live, I think there are two like quite different use cases that I would describe to them. The first is that, first and foremost, there are many really cool Max for Live devices that you can use in your projects. So these come in all different shapes and sizes. Some of them are very functional. Some of them are very quirky and have, real lives of their own. So that alone is a huge selling point. I think I could quickly show you some of them.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So
and it's also, they also now look different as well, which I think is
yeah. So we've updated a lot of the UIs to make it kind of more in line with Live's UI.
Yeah.
So let me go back to this lead here for a second, where I had, yeah. So on this track, I'd also made this kind of a glitchy delay effect. So I'll just show what that does. This is nothing to do with Max yet. It's just some Ableton devices. So it's like a kind of a weird spacey kind of a reverby delay sound. So I quite like when this moves, but I don't want to just sit here doing this all the time with the mouse. So with Max, one of the great things you get is these modulators. So this is, I think, one of the most well-known Max devices that we have. It's just a simple LFO. You can map it to almost anything. So I can click this button, map it to this mix parameter, and it will slowly start to adjust this. So I have it set to do this over 4 bars now. So I'll just hit play and you can hear what it does. Super useful. There are many more modulators like this that you can use. I won't go through them all today, but there's quite a few of them that you can do. So that'd be like the very kind of functional device that you can get with Max for Live. There are other, as I said, more kind of quirky ones. So one of the things that we released with Live 11 is a collection of Max for Live devices called Inspired by Nature. And yes, the name says the builder of these devices really look towards nature for inspiration, like so kind of physical forces that exist in the world around us. So if I take, so maybe let's go back to this, the follow actions thing I had going on here. So as I said, this is just playing, each of these just plays a single note, nothing else, which can kind of get a bit, a bit boring in itself. So I will add this max effect, which is called Bouncy Notes. So Bouncy Notes is a gravity-based MIDI sequencer. So you'll see what happens now. These little balls will appear and they bounce according to gravity. And each time they hit the piano, they will play a note. So let's give it a try. And then some Max for Live devices also come in the form of instruments. So another part of this pack from Live 11 is called Vector Grain. It is a granular looper. So what that basically means is, so the concept of granular is that it takes an audio file, breaks it into tiny little bits, and then kind of rearranges these, scatters them in some way. And so this is a looper, so it'll do that and it'll loop it. The vector part comes from kind of how it scatters these micro snippets of sounds around. So it's kind of based on the principles of like magnetism and sort of flow fields. So let me find another sample just to use it. We'll go for another Dart one, why not?
Yeah.
So let's see what we have. This one, the speaker was broken on the Dart and the announcement sounded really distorted.
Here in the rear of the train. This is not the normal stop point for this size train. Please be patient.
So I can just drag that onto the device and let's see what it does. So yeah, I mean, there's so much more that I could show here in terms of the cool devices, but I'm conscious of the time that we have.
Absolutely.
That's so cool.
But I think that the important part about the big change with 11 is that the use of the Max devices, it's interchangeable with the Ableton ones. The other part is, I have to ask you, when you were in college in Trinity here, did you study Max at the time?
So my thesis, so not as part of my regular college, but actually the thesis that I did explored the kind of DSP tools that artists could use in installations and these kind of things. So I kind of built some stuff in Max at that time, and maybe that's a good segue to the other thing that I would tell this random stranger who asked me on the street what's good about Max. I've just shown you the devices now, but of course there's a whole other side to Max, which is basically what happens when you press the edit button. So there's this button here which allows you to open up the device and edit it and take a look under the hood. So let's click it here. I hope you can see that on the screen, can you?
Yeah.
Yeah, good, okay. So yeah, I can
So this is what we mean by being a visual programming language.
exactly. So there are these objects that you can connect to each other, and you can build in UI elements. So if you look down here, here's these UI elements that are part of the patch. And then when you kind of pack it all up, that's how it looks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the LFO. So I mean, you can build really whatever you want. The sky's the limit. I mean, kind of literally, you could build a patch that's based off the weather if you wanted. You could really do anything with it. And you can also just open these devices, take a look, kind of tinker around, borrow some bits for your own devices. So there's a whole community based around this, a whole community of Max builders. There's a lot of stuff that you can buy on the internet.
And it's cheap, by the way. A lot of the Max devices are free, and compared to the majority of third-party plugins, the prices are nominal. And then there's companies like, for instance, Jazztronik, who are doing some great devices.
Totally.
So I think that's one of the things what we touched on initially about, certainly for me, what makes Ableton different is also that human community of creativity that's around it. And when you show, for instance, Max there, the fact that you can open up the coding, fiddle around, it's just phenomenal. It's the opposite of a closed product community. And I find that very, very exciting myself. Bas, do you?
It is, no, it's amazing. Like the fact that there is a community that, and every time like you search like for Max for Live devices, there's probably something that has been done already. So there might be already, like something that exists that you can incorporate it very, very quickly into this. It's
Actually, that's
really
true. I mean,
great.
there was a guy we worked with who was a Mac specialist, and I remember when we were first working with him, and we were trying to say, "So tell us more about what Max does." And he goes, "Okay, tell me what your problem is first, and then I'll use it to solve it." And I went, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, well, okay." And that suddenly was a different way of approaching a device where you suddenly went, okay, it's that possible. You can change this to fix issues or notions that you might have from performance. That's why it's used a lot in installations, and make bespoke creations. That works as a nice kind of segue to something else that I'd like to chat about in relation to Ableton, which is that you mentioned there, for instance, that your own preferred creative path is with a mouse, which is, Vas, you're quite similar in that respect.
Absolutely.
But if we talk a little bit about Push, because that's also something that you've been instrumental, that's a bad pun, apologies for that, but in developing. And we should talk a little bit about that, because it's another part of the Ableton experience that's quite unique. If we just switched, we can show we have one here. I know you don't have two cameras. If we could switch to the shot here, we can show Push.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen, and you can.
Yeah. So this is back here where we are, and it just tells us a little bit about how, like, again, the philosophy behind Push. Because I remember when we first started teaching, Push came out, and we told everybody, "Oh, now we're teaching you an instrument," and it was like there was a lot of confused faces. I don't think that applies anymore. Now that distinction isn't as demarcated. But what's the philosophy behind this?
Well, I mean, Push is really all about hands-on music making. So, I mean, the thinking behind it was that it would let you sort of put the computer to a side and just really, focus on tactile experiences, on, hitting pads and turning coders, but it would still it would feel very immediate and very playable, but it would still give you quite give you the depth that you might need. So this is quite baked into the design philosophy of Push. There are many menus that you can dive deep into if you want to, but you also don't have to. You can stay quite on the surface as well. I think one of the most interesting things about Push is the pads. So when you think about an instrument, to choose this kind of a layout, this isomorphic layout was kind of a risk. It was kind of it could have been perceived to be quite out there. So when you play melodies, you have to learn these different shapes that you can play with your fingers to get, for example, a fifth or something like that. But once you know these things and once you figure it out, it's actually very intuitive, and it's a lot of fun. I tour a lot with Push. I bring it with me on stage quite a bit, and it's usually smack in the middle of my studio setup as well. It's a very useful and fun way to interact with live without going near the computer.
Maybe we should show a little bit about some of the features that you've spoken about, and apologies for what we're about to do, because this obviously you've created this or been a large part of it. But maybe we can just show a little bit about how some of the randomization works.
Sure.
So if we just take, say, for instance, a drum rack.
Absolutely, let's go.
And show how it appears. And again, this is identical to how Simon was working, but as you can see, we have a drum rack here with samples. And we should be able to hear that. Can you hear that, Simon? Okay. And let's just build a little beat for a sec. Like a 1-bar beat.
Yeah. So we put a couple of snares. And shall we try to put maybe 2 more kicks?
And then we can change the probability of them.
Perfect. So let's highlight them there. Just going to go to clip. Select them there, and then that's the probability. Bring it down maybe 40% or something.
Perfect. And now we're just dialing in what Simon has been writing with the mouse. And if we do the same with some hats.
Absolutely, yeah. So these two, sometimes are happening, sometimes that's what will happen now. Let's put this on repeat. There we go for 8s. And now similarly, we could highlight them and control either the velocity,
Exactly.
or the range, like we were doing earlier. So these now will change. We can do this with these guys as well. Around 40 or something.
That's working great. So what we then have is this, we've seen how that can work. We get that nice bit of variation going in. And let's try some melodic now on top.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And use the same kind of randomization.
Cool, okay. So
Just take
put an instrument first,
Yeah.
Just a bit lower.
hopefully that was a very good example there of how, for instance, the importance of the individual notes working with MPE and the changes that work. Really, really great.
Absolutely, so expressive, like so.
And one other thing that we didn't touch on yet, but that's a huge feature of Ableton Live, we can't show it here unfortunately, is that if you're recording something like that, for instance, like that lead part, Simon, that Pathos was playing there, can you tell us a little bit about the comping function inside of Ableton, because it's a huge change.
Yeah, I think again it's the kind of thing that might be a bit easier for me to just demonstrate. So comping is basically it's a recording workflow. So you know, if you imagine you're trying to capture a vocal line or do an instrumental take, you're probably not going to get it the first time. You know, usually it takes you a couple of goes before you can really lock it down. And this is basically the whole premise of the feature comping. So it allows you to keep recording, get all these different iterations of it, or takes as we call them, and then you can recombine these. So you can say, well, the way I sang that bit was really good, I'm going to combine it with this, and you can sort of stitch everything together. As you may have gathered from my music, I am neither a singer nor an instrumentalist, but I find this works quite well for I have some hardware, I have some, like a modular synth for example, and I find this works quite nicely just to capture a lot of ideas, and then you can combine them into some quite cool beats. So yeah, let me show you. I'm just going to, let's pretend I have some machines connected here. I haven't, but I just have a recording that I took a while ago, and that's playing here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to the arrangement view, and I'll say, let's maybe try and record like a 2-bar loop or something. So I'll turn on looping, and what I'm going to do, sorry, let me get rid of these. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to record takes here. So I will, I think I tried this before, that's why you can see some. Let me just get rid of these. Okay, now we're ready to go. So imagine I'm just about to start recording something in from my modular, and I want to get some takes from that. So I'll hit record. See what's happened there. Normally what it would do is it would just record once and you'd only have one, but now what it's done is it's added all of these lanes and it's added all of these different takes. So I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different takes, and what I can do, for example, is I can say, well, I like this bit of that one, and this bit was also quite good. There was something here that I really liked. I think this bit here maybe. And let me take this bit of that take, and I'll grab this as well. And you can see that all these now will be part of this main track. So let me play that back. Already it can be quite fun, even if you're not using it for vocals or instruments. You can also use it for your machines. And the same also applies to MIDI. So this was just audio, but you can apply exactly the same workflow with MIDI. So you can record multiple iterations or takes of you playing with a keyboard or with push, and then choose the best bits, the bits that work best for your performance.
Oh, it's a brilliant addition, and it's a real game changer. And also the other one we should mention as well is the fact that you can edit multiple tracks at the same time. So if you happen to have something like a conventional analog drum kit where you've got maybe up to 8-10 channels, you can edit them all simultaneously, and it changes everything. It's absolutely brilliant. Well done on that. It's a great piece of fluent design, You're a fan as well, aren't you?
Of the comping, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. I'm so glad it's in now.
So there's a happy customer, and thanks for that. Now we got some questions from the audience that have been sent in to us, Simon. So if you're happy to take a few.
Of course, yeah, more than happy.
First one comes from Mark Stanley, and he says, does Simon work on the hardware side too? Which, well, you do. And do you have any insights of what the long-term direction of Ableton hardware is? And obviously, we should just point out at the moment, there's Pushes the Ableton hardware, and we'll be looking for tells in case there's an Ableton 3 or anything else that's in the pipeline. Like, can you tell us, are there anything planned, or can you talk about anything like this? Or?
Well, so first of all, yeah, I used to work on hardware, so I worked before on the Push team. Now I'm responsible for the software part only, so just live. 3 is the number that comes after 2, but we don't, I can't share any concrete plans that we would have. One of the things I would say is that from our point of view, we have this kind of philosophy where we want to keep our instruments alive as long as possible, which is why even now we're still adding features to Push 2 and Push 1. Like, they've been in the market for quite some time, and we will continue to upgrade them, continue to add value to them. And that's very important to us. So that's what I can say about the future hardware direction of Ableton, that we will continue to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've experienced as well. When we've been demonstrating, say for instance, Push 2, we can also show Push 1, and it doesn't become a legacy. It doesn't become obsolete. It can often be an entry point model, and it's secondhand, it's great value. And also has to be mentioned about the terrific educational program that Ableton introduced with Push 2. That was extraordinary. The fact that if you, for instance, you brought back in your Push 1s, and then they were given away to schools and colleges, and it was a brilliant initiative. So it is true, and you can see it, for instance, with Ableton 11, the changes that have been made to Push 2. It wasn't like, here's go out and we've made Push 3, kind of pushing you into that territory that other companies do. Now we have another question. This one comes from Katie Laffron, who questions, you're familiar with music and media tech in Trinity. What do you think a relevant qualification for Ableton would be? Or moving into the future for software engineers, would it be more maths or physics based?
Yeah, really, really good question, actually. My own experience was a funny one, because I think I got, when I was hired into support, and I kind of moved from there to a few other teams, it was only after a couple of years that someone went, "Oh, you're an engineer." So nobody even really knew that I was an engineer up until that point. I would say it really depends on the kind of thing that you would like to do. So I finished my engineering degree and knew after that I didn't want to be an engineer. From that point of view, I think applying for a job as an engineer didn't really actually make so much sense for me. So I would say if you want to apply to be an engineer, of course you should have passion for engineering. You should have, I think, some qualifications there, and probably some experience as well if you can. But there are many other things you could do. There's the role of UX design, user research, UI design. So a lot of these things require a sort of product expertise and really in-depth knowledge about the music making world. And I could imagine so I do know that course in Trinity, and I almost applied for it myself, but I decided I'd rather move to Berlin. And there are some people I know who have gone through that course and who now work at Ableton as well.
Very good. Vas, you were asking earlier about streaming.
I don't know if it would be any plans for online kind of collaboration. You know how, for example, people are now collaborating through, let's say, Splice, for example, and they're using those platforms. I was wondering if there's something in terms of and there are some plugins that they allow kind of. But would that be of any?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course a very interesting topic. I can't really comment on any future development plans, though. I mean, it's certainly the collaborating either in person or online is a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
Me personally, I collaborate with some people making music, and it's difficult.
I mean, one of the great parts of the collaboration, and I'm a huge fan of, we didn't even mention it tonight, is Ableton Link, which often we just, in the midst of all the new innovations, it goes unmentioned, and yet it's now fundamental to all kinds of iOS and Android devices. Ableton Link, for anybody who doesn't know, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, pretty much nearly every one of my music apps has Ableton Link in it, and literally what it does is you just turn it on and it will seamlessly integrate and its tempo with Ableton, and it will also, the other part which I love as well is you don't even need Ableton for Ableton Link to work. Apps will join together, and it's a great way for people to collaborate on a cost-effective level. Is iOS, is that going to continue? I hope it will continue to be part of your future design work, because it's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Link is certainly not going anywhere. I think it's a fantastic feature. It's super useful, and I think the widespread integration of it now makes it all the more powerful.
Yeah. And one final big philosophical one that I noticed, but I loved as well, was the bringing in terms of tempo, the follow switch. Can you tell us a little bit about what that actually means? And you, when we spoke originally, you said about putting it out there into the wild. So we're obviously not going to do a demonstration of it, but for me that it just changes the whole principle of people being tied to computers, and the computer effectively having the option to integrate at whatever level into anybody's workflow.
Yeah, that's right. So there's this new feature with Live 11 called like the tempo follower, and basically what you can do is you can ask Live to listen to an audio input and try to understand it, and like try to understand the rhythm and the speed that it's being played at. So this has been designed kind of with the drummer in mind. So that was something that we saw quite a lot in the past, that anyone who used Live in a band, everyone had to have a click track, which kind of sucks in certain cases. Like some people just really don't like that and want to freely fluctuate in tempo and things like that. So with this feature, Live no longer needs to drive the clock. It can be driven rather by the drummer in the band, which feels a lot more natural. Of course, as with all of these live features, I mean, I think that's kind of at least it's a philosophy of mine that I'm pushing for within the team. It's this idea of creative misuse. So of course this is, designed for drummers, but you can put anything in there and see what happens. You could have it synced to turntables when you're doing a DJ set. You could have it follow your washing machine.
We're back to convolutional reverbs here. but I love it. But what's perfect about the way you're describing that, though, is that it just again leaves it open. And that's what we often forget, because we speak about Ableton and we always abbreviate this idea of Ableton Live. And of course, when we speak about Ableton Live, we don't mean it's for live performance per se, but it is away from this very conservative approach that has dominated, and there's nothing wrong with it, but of the recording studio has been the de facto way of a linear recording and linear lines, and from follow actions to the idea of getting your washing machine to a tempo that will somehow determine the computer, to what you were showing us earlier with the convolution reverbs. The imagination just, I'm so excited that, it's the highest endorsement, and I think it's probably a good point for us to finish, and thank you so much, not just for tonight, but for the passion and the design from the whole team that's gone into this. There were so many small incremental changes when we were preparing for tonight. We couldn't get over how many things haven't even been highlighted in the manual or anywhere else that have changed. So thank you very much both for tonight. and for the work, and stay where you are. Please don't come back to Dublin. Keep working in Ableton. We look forward to Ableton 12 and the rest of this adventure. So thank you, Simon. I'd like to thank a few other people just before we go tonight. Danny White in London and Simon Lyon, who's been working at the questions for us from the chat rooms. Obviously, I'd like to thank Vasileios Gourgourinis for joining us. Jane and Eamon, who've put up with many of our peculiar technical requirements, and thankfully it's all worked out good on the evening. If you know nothing about music making and you would like to learn a little bit, myself and Vas are doing a sound workshop here at the Science Gallery online in about 3 weeks. That's a Next Signal event. And that's specifically designed for people who may be nervous or apprehensive and want to get started. Ableton, as you can see, sounds fantastic. So there's not a huge amount that we actually have to show other than just to encourage you to have fun. I should also point out, it's worth, if you go to ableton.com, you can download the trial version, which is the full bells and whistles version of Ableton, and it will work for 3 months, which is plenty of time as we're coming out of lockdown for you to fall in love with it and change your future. There you go. I think that says all we need to say. Thanks again, Simon, and
Thank you very much.
and good night. There we go.